The following program presents principles designed to promote good health and is not intended to take the place of personalized professional care. The opinions and ideas expressed are those of the speaker. Viewers are encouraged to draw their own conclusions about the information presented.
Hello and welcome to Wonderfully Made. My name is Dr. Christine Salter. I'm board certified in family medicine and in private practice in St. Louis, Missouri. Today we're going to be discussing about a simple home remedy called activated charcoal. Mr. John Dinsley, who's our guest, has written a book about this. Welcome, John.
Well, it's a real pleasure to be here with you today, Dr. Salter. I'm going to enjoy this.
Tell me, why did you write a book about charcoal?
Well, it is a good question. A lot of people do ask me that, and it goes back a few years, 30-some years ago. Well, not quite 30. I decided to hike around the world, and on my adventures, I wandered into a small medical clinic in Guatemala, and there was a physician there and his family who were working and living there. The Dr. Graves was a board-certified California physician. He was a graduate of Loma Linda University.
Okay.
They had an amazing lifestyle, which fascinated me. But one of the things that really captivated my attention was their use of natural medicine or natural remedies.
Simple remedies.
Simple, very simple. You see, a lot of the patients that came to the clinic lived back in the mountains, and they really didn't have good access to the clinic, and so the doctor tried to equip them with things that they could use when they went back to their villages.
So what impressed you about this particular village and what this physician was doing?
Well, again, the natural medicine. I had in university, I'd had an interest in science and biology, and I'd taken a break from that, and I wanted to explore the world. But it was such a new idea to think about using simple natural remedies. I was used to going to a hospital, to an emergency room, visiting my doctor in a
That's
nice
right.
office
Yes.
back in America, and this was a completely different setting. And one day, I remember clearly, we were right along the Pan American Highway. A bus stopped, and these parents came in, rushed in with this young child in their arms, obviously unconscious, convulsing. And the doctor immediately assessed the situation, decided it was some form of food poisoning, had the parents remove the blouse, and he mixed up this black stuff, this paste, and he smeared it all over her belly.
Oh.
And within, I'm sure, 15 minutes, the girl was resting quietly. And I thought, black magic.
What was that black stuff?
Well, believe it or not, it was charcoal. Now, a lot of people say, you mean charcoal briquettes? No, it's not charcoal briquettes. It's, in this particular instance, it was just ground up charcoal. But what we were going to be talking about today with the audience is medicinal charcoal or activated gray charcoal.
Please tell our audience what you mean by activated charcoal.
Well, we start off with the raw product charcoal. The leftovers from your campfire, from your wood stove, is basically just carbon. Most of the other products have been burned off. It's been basically dehydrated, and you have this charcoal. Now, when you activate charcoal, you actually take that raw product again and you heat it back up to a high temperature, say 800 degrees Celsius, and then you subject it to air or maybe steam under pressure, and this erodes the internal structure, the fabric of this charcoal particle, and it gives us this tremendous surface area. So that's what activation or activated charcoal means.
Okay, so I know that in the emergency room, the standard dose of activated charcoal, which is 50 grams, that is actually equivalent to the size of 10 football fields.
Well, it is. It's absolutely amazing, this internal network, this lattice work, if you want, of the charcoal. And maybe we could throw up on our screen a picture of charcoal powder.
Okay.
And you can see how really fine it is. Now, charcoal is actually made from a number of different products, or I should say activated charcoal. It can come from wood, hardwoods. It can actually come from olive pits or bamboo or coconut.
Okay.
There are many different sources for the initial product, and then they activate it. And you can see on the screen here that it is very, very fine. If you want to take a look at the next one, we have actually an electron micrographic picture of a charcoal particle.
Okay.
And on this one, even this very, very minute particle, you can see on this picture how much surface there
Lots of
is there.
crevices. Yes.
Now you can imagine taking 50 grams of that and unfolding this, and you can see the tremendous surface area. And it's that surface area that accounts for some of the amazing qualities that charcoal has.
Well, actually, you know, the American Academy of Pediatrics put out a position statement in 2003 that said activated charcoal was the best intervention for reducing the availability of ingested substances. So we can see from that surface area why it does this. But tell me, how far does charcoal go back?
Well, it has a long history. We can trace it back to 1500 years BC.
Oh.
Some interesting things. Back then, they were using it to control odors from wounds.
Okay.
Eventually, they decided, well, if it does so good with controlling odors, they discovered, well, let's bury our dead in layers of sand and charcoal, and it was able to preserve these dead bodies. They'd already experimented with posts along the River Nile, preserve these dead posts. So it preserved them. Then moving up to, say, 400 BC, Hippocrates prescribed charcoal for anthrax and different things in his day, along with Pliny. Then it starts moving into our, let's say, the 1700s, and the sugar industry started using charcoal to whiten sugar. The activation process developed in the late 1800s. And then the uses of charcoal literally exploded. They were using it for all manner of different things.
All kind of things.
Maybe we could show up on our screen a graphic showing some of these different uses of charcoal. As I said, it goes back to 1500 years BC. You'll see that it was using it for flatulence and indigestion, that's gas. In fact, when Europeans came to North America, they found American Indians using charcoal to control indigestion. Since then, of course, we've found that it works very well for nausea and vomiting. Diarrhea, we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. Poisoning, we'll talk about that as well. Poisonous bites, anthrax, kidney and liver dialysis machines used in hospitals, pink eye, colostomies. They used it in cancer, also for hepatitis. There's even literature now talking about charcoal's ability to reduce cholesterol.
Oh,
of course, it's used in allergies. Yes, cholesterol.
Heart disease is the #1 killer. And so something as simple as cholesterol lowering with charcoal would be extremely useful.
Sounds almost like black magic, doesn't it?
It does sound like black magic.
But you know, there is a lot of science behind it. And so it is used in industry every single day. Vegetable oils are cleaned with charcoal. We drink water that's filtered with charcoal. And as you saw on that screen, kidney dialysis machines actually filter blood through a bed of granular charcoal to make it clean.
Well, hospitals are using this on a regular basis, but we want our viewing audience to know they're not hospital personnel, so should they feel comfortable about using this remedy in the home?
They certainly can. Not everybody has the privilege of living next door to a hospital or an emergency ward. And some of our viewers probably are living in other countries where even their medical facilities are even more remote than we see them here. But even in our own communities here in North America, people in their homes are using it every single day. My wife and I use it in our home, have been using it for almost 30 years. Our children use it, and they've taught their children to use it, so our grandchildren are accustomed to using it. But again, healthcare professionals use it, not only in the hospitals. I have a very close friend. She's a head nurse she's worked across North America, Hawaii, Alaska, in emergency rooms. And you've worked in emergency rooms as well. She's used it there, but she uses it in her home as well.
Absolutely. I've used it in my home too. I've seen it used in the emergency room for toxic ingestions where somebody may die unless they're given this, but something simply in the home. We're not suggesting that our viewers use this in an emergency situation. Well, not here in North America because we know they can get to an emergency room. But in other places where they may not have access, we would hope that they would use this. But for something very simple like a sore throat or an insect bite, have you had any experiences with those?
Well, yes, there's numbers of stories of insect bites. I guess one that comes to my mind is Dr. Thrash, who is a medical director for the state of Georgia, has been for 40-some years. She tells a story of her granddaughter who was outside playing, and she found herself playing on a hill of fire ants. And within seconds, there were literally hundreds of these insects biting her, and was screaming hysterically. Dr. Thrash ran up, they grabbed the child, ran for the house, filled a tub with warm water, placed the child in the warm water, and it had already mixed in charcoal powder. She said within 2 minutes, this poor child had stopped screaming, that the charcoal had neutralized the poisons, and the child was basically pain-free. Now, that's her experience. Dr. Agatha went so far as to say if she was stranded on a desert island and she could only choose one thing to take along with her for infections, for emergency, for accidents, she would choose charcoal.
Activated charcoal, absolutely. And I do agree with her on that. I've had an experience myself when I was in Florida, and I react I'm highly reactive to wasp stings or bee stings. And in fact, I was actually doing a demonstration about activated charcoal, and I'd already made up my poultice to be able to show the audience. And so that was already ready and waiting for me. And so in the interim, we went outside, and I was just out there having a conversation, and I felt something on my hand, and then the sting. And I knew that that my hand would swell, and so immediately I grabbed that poultice that was for the demonstration, and I put that right on there. And within, I'd say, 30 seconds, the stinging, the pain was gone, and I had no reaction. Usually I really would swell, and I had no reaction to that. And so when you think about the science of that, we've already showed the graphic of the surface area. Right. There's something called van der Waals forces, where they attract different particles to them, and so it makes sense. Yeah,
I like to relate it to a black hole. You know, this phenomena up in space is able to pull things to it, and then it doesn't let go of them.
Right.
It sounds fantastic, but here we have charcoal. You can't see black holes, but you can see charcoal.
Absolutely.
And if we had a quart jar here of activated charcoal, we're told that one quart jar can hold up to 80 quarts of ammonia gas. It's that tremendous surface area that binds these proteins or gas molecules or toxins, whatever they are, and holds them, and in the case of poisoning, holds them until the charcoal and the poison is eliminated from the body.
Eliminated from the body.
Now, obviously, we're not saying that people shouldn't make use of emergency rooms.
Right, we're not saying that.
Some people may have it go into an anaphylactic shock because of a bee sting. But how much more sense it makes to apply the charcoal while you're heading towards an emergency room where you can get professional help. This is sort of like a fire extinguisher until the firemen get to your help.
Instead of the parents or the family members feeling helpless, they would dial 911, and then they would put a poultice on, or they would have them drink some of that activated charcoal.
Exactly. In fact, there's a number of the poison control centers across North America do recommend, in fact, that you have charcoal in the home. I know there's some discussion whether parents are able to properly administer it to their children, but whether that's true or not, it seems to me that a parent who knows the child and the child who knows the parent is going to have a lot easier time to apply the charcoal in the home, and then head off to the emergency
room.
Exactly.
What about something as simple as an ear infection? I remember my son was just a toddler and woke up screaming, pulling at his ear, and I knew exactly what was going on. I was a medical student at the time, and I looked in his ear, and he had a bulging eardrum. and I quickly made up a charcoal poultice and applied it to the external ear. And of course, I'd found that information from Dr. Agatha Thrash, and I applied that, and I'd say within just a few minutes, he calmed down, and he was able to sleep through the night. I still took him to the doctor the next morning, and she determined that he did have an ear infection, but it was amazing to have him just settle down and sleep through the night with a bulging eardrum.
And of course, that lets you relax a little bit too.
Exactly.
Well, I use an acronym called SAFE.
Tell us what SAFE means.
SAFE, as I've traveled in different countries, I've come back to North America with our amazing healthcare system. It's so readily available for most of us. And then I compare them to countries like Nepal or working out in the Pacific, where you may be hours from the nearest road or you may be days from the nearest clinic. And I came to have to ask myself the question, do you have to be wealthy to be healthy? Or does God only love rich people?
No.
Well, I don't think so either.
Not at all.
And so I came up with this acronym. I looked at, if God really loves us wherever you are in the world, whatever your socioeconomic status is, then it seems to me that remedies should be simple, they should be affordable, they should be accessible. You're going to have to measure out a little bit of faith when you take it with you. And lastly, they should be easy to apply. And then charcoal is easy. It's a little bit messy, but as you've used it over and over again, it gets easier to use.
It does get easier to use. I had my fair share of making a mess with charcoal. I know how to do it quite expertly now, but initially we had charcoal powder everywhere.
Yes.
But that SAFE acronym is really important. You said that maybe a place like Nepal would be a place for it to be used, but even here in North America, there's a lot of people who do not have access to health care. They cannot afford it, and they're out in the rural areas, and in some counties the physicians are moving away because of malpractice litigation. And so we do have a tremendous amount of people who do not have access, and this is something that is fairly simple that really could save someone's life.
Really, in fact, I was talking with one of the technicians before we did our program today, and he's training to be an EMT. And he was saying that, yeah, on board they carry charcoal.
They carry activated charcoal.
So on the way to the hospital, if you haven't applied it, there's a good chance they may apply it on the way to the hospital. But there's a number of different ways we can use it in the home. You mentioned the ears. Okay. You can apply it as a poultice or an eye wash for the eye infections.
Tell our viewing audience what a poultice is.
Well, you make a paste with charcoal. You can make it just with water. It tends to dry out more quickly. But if you mix it with something like ground up flaxseed, it makes a paste, a gel, and that moisture holds longer, and it's that moist contact with the skin that allows charcoal to somehow mysteriously draw toxins or poisons through the skin into the charcoal poultice.
And we want to make a point that this is not absorption. It's not sucking up. It's adsorbing, AD, onto the surface through all these little crevices that we've spoken about. It has this
electrostatic type of affinity for other molecules. Some of them are, we might want to call them loose cannons. They're sort of in our body, maybe free radicals or toxins or waste products. And the Lancet magazine, which is a premier medical journal for England, has reported that when they apply charcoal poultice superficially, that somehow the mystery of charcoal is able to actually pull these toxins from deep tissue and as well deep organs. Well,
the forces that are, those Van der Waal forces that we talked about that are on the surface of charcoal really do pull and attract.
Yeah. Great black hole.
Into that big black hole.
Recently, a friend sent in a story of their daughter. Now, this lady is a nurse, practices at a large hospital.
Okay.
Her husband is an anesthesiologist, and their daughter developed urinary tract infection at the age of 2 years, I believe. And for the next 5.5 years, she suffered with this problem chronically. It got to the point where their physician decided that he would have to go in and scrape the ureters, scrape the bladder, dilate it, and check out the kidney as well. That's
That's
quite a
major.
major procedure.
There.
And it was, you can imagine the trauma, not just for the child, but the parents, what it must have put them through, thinking about, oh, there's got to be some other solution. Well, after 5.5 years, it was time to do another procedure, and the parents said, no, there's got to be something else. And they knew a chemist.
Okay.
And this chemist said, why don't you try charcoal? Place it in water, have her drink this charcoal slurry. Well, they did, and when the child took it, the friend told me that the child was symptomatic at the time. She was in a great deal of discomfort and pain within 2 hours. Within 2 hours, she was pain-free, and the last report was, after a period of time, I'm not sure of the period of time, but the child was symptom-free.
Symptom-free and no more recurrent urinary tract infections.
Can you imagine if they could have discovered this 5 years ago?
5 years
Yes.
sooner. You know, I've used charcoal for food poisoning. No one likes to run into the bathroom with diarrhea and that cramping that occurs.
Yes, you don't have to wait till a severe case of poisoning.
Right.
We may go out to eat at a restaurant, or some friends may invite us home, or we're traveling overseas for whatever reason, and we eat some strange food or drink some strange water, and we suddenly find ourselves with an upset, floppy stomach.
Right.
And it's not bad enough that we have to go to the emergency, but we don't really want to lay there all night either. Well, take a glass of water, stir the charcoal into the water.
Into the water, not the other way around.
Not the other way around, and drink that down. And usually, within a half an hour, that upset stomach, that indigestion or gas or heartburn or acid reflux is brought under control.
Well, you know, on PubMed in the American Journal of Gastroenterology, they did do a study. It was a double-blind clinical trial that looked at activated charcoal in decrease in intestinal gas. And so those things that we were doing through faith, there's actually some clinical research to substantiate that.
Well, there's lots of anecdotal stories out there, but I found, as I gathered some of the stories for the book, how many people who had really good stories were actually healthcare providers, whether doctors, physicians' assistants, nurses, chemists, lab techs, people who are really informed. Now, this is something unusual because back in 1908, the Sears and Roebuck catalog actually carried charcoal in their catalog.
In their catalog.
And they said, as everybody knows, charcoal is so good for indigestion, heartburn and gas, and so forth. But that was 1908, and somehow charcoal disappeared off the radar screen, and it's only now people are becoming more aware of it. We attended a trade show, and somebody picked up the literature when I wasn't there and contacted me after the show, and he was a head nurse in an emergency room.
Oh, really?
And he said, charcoal, it's absolutely amazing. And he says, I don't even wait to get sick. If I feel the symptoms of a flu coming on or a bug, upset stomach, I take the charcoal. He said, I don't know how it works, but it seems to eliminate those symptoms, and I'm free. I don't have to go through the whole flu cycle.
Well, that's a principle in simple home remedies, that you do start at the very first sign of symptoms. Don't wait until all the symptoms track in, because by that time
you will need to go to the emergency.
You will need to go to the emergency room. So whatever it is, whether it's a cold, whether it's an upset stomach, right away we want people doing those simple home remedies. Charcoal, drinking lots of water. We like to do that water flush where you drink, several glasses in just an hour's time, and that really flushes the virus likes dry membranes, and so if you flush those membranes, the virus are not able to attack and attach as easily.
Sure.
And then you couple that with activated charcoal with those van der Waals forces pulling and sucking in those toxins, then we've truly got a nice, simple remedy.
Well, you mentioned water, and charcoal as a simple home remedy only is as effective as we use a holistic health program. You mentioned water. Of course, we know about exercise and good nutrition and all these other preventives. So charcoal is not a magic bullet.
No,
it's not a cure-all. Sometimes it works. For many people, it does work. Sometimes it may not work, and you're going to have to look for some other safe remedy as an alternative before you have to go to the hospital, if need be.
Exactly.
Another thing that people sometimes say, oh, charcoal is burnt toast. Now, I'm not saying that burnt toast might not be a home remedy, but it's not charcoal.
It's not charcoal. In fact, burnt toast is actually carcinogenic.
Yes, it's superheated carbohydrates, proteins, and fats.
Right.
And these things, yeah, they can be carcinogenic.
They can be carcinogenic, meaning cancer-forming.
Correct. And since you brought up carcinogenic, let's talk a little bit briefly about briquettes.
Yes.
I know that there are actual natural charcoal briquettes, but most people, when they go into the store and buy briquettes, it's impregnated with fossil fuels to help them ignite. And that is not something you would want to take internally or apply superficially. Now, there's also been, some people have said, well, charcoal is carcinogenic. And the reason is the connection to benzopyrenes. Right. A lot of people barbecue their food, braise your food, and what happens is when they're cooking their food, these fats, juices drip down onto these hot coals, they vaporize, form these benzopyrenes, and then embed themselves against the bottom of the food that they're barbecuing. But that's not charcoal, it's the heat, from the charcoal that produces these benzopyrenes. So there we have the list. Charcoal is not toast, it's not briquettes, and it's not a cure-all. I would want to mention to you, charcoal has an indefinite lifespan. You may, when you buy it at the store, it'll come either as a powder, as a tablet, as a capsule, and sometimes it will be stamped with a shelf life. It's only for marketing purposes. Actually, if you keep the lid tight, it will last indefinitely.
And I've had charcoal for years.
Yes.
Yeah, I've had 10 years.
Sure.
Yes,
it's still very, very active.
And it's very effective.
Right. In fact, the WHO, World Health Organization, has passed a resolution encouraging member nations to really study into using simple, natural, harmless, scientifically proven remedies. And I can think of no remedy that fits that description better than charcoal. In fact, when you think of diarrhea, now diarrhea, according to the WHO, kills around 5,000 people every single day of the year. Cholera is a major killer in some developing countries. We don't have it here. But charcoal deals with severe diarrhea. When I was working on a remote island out in the Pacific, the community nurse was dealing with a patient who had severe cholera. She was not able to help him with her standard medicines. And she gave charcoal, stopped the diarrhea. She then gave the rehydration salts, and she was able to save his life.
So from something as simple as a bee sting to something as serious as cholera, activated charcoal is simple and scientifically proven.
Yes.
John, I want to thank you for coming and sharing this wonderful information with us and with our viewing audience and those around the world. Thank you. And we wish above all things that you will prosper and be in health, even as your soul prospers. May God bless you.